Hello, everyone, and it's that time again. Welcome to the Sidney St. James Show. We sure appreciate you dropping in. Hello, everyone. This is Sidney St. James, and I'm glad you're joining me again. Today for episode 13, the making of I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. And the sequel to that, I Am Woman, I Am Invincible. Well, welcome back. You know, just the other day, and I must have hundreds upon hundreds of them, I pulled out some of my CDs from one of my shows at the Cool 99 radio station here in Austin, Texas. That's where I used to spend my Sunday nights and did a show called 50s Fun on Sunday nights. You know, and when I pulled out this CD, I happened to look at it, and on the cover was Helen Reddy. And I opened it up and stuck it in my trusty CD player, which I still have. Everything now you listen to little iPods in your ears and so forth. But so I started listening to it. It got me thinking again about how the making of I Am Woman, a two-part series, actually came about. Well, while Helen Reddy was singing her song, my memories turned back to a time when I was standing in front of the cafeteria in College Station, Texas. I opened the door and held it for two female college students. And yes, when I went to school, girls had just kind of started going to school there as well. I smiled and they stopped and said, "No, thank you. We are quite capable of opening our own door." Women's lib in the 70s. I thought it was rude of them back then, but when I became a writer and along with the internet and research demonstrated to me, they earned the right to be strong, invincible, and woman. You know, I was writing this series. There was another series called the Abraham Lincoln Assassination Series. And during the writing of that series, I came to understand where the woman's place was in the mid-1800s, especially during the writing of the fifth book in the series called Mary Elizabeth Surratt, a woman conspirator in the killing of Abraham Lincoln. I learned so much more about the struggles of women before and after the Civil War. And yes, even up to that very day where the two women declined my offer of opening the door for them. My story has its quiet beginning at a convention being held in Seneca Falls, New York. The year was 1848. Susan B. Anthony was there. And it was here, actually, where her legacy had its beginning. My main character in the book was only 10 years old when she participated in the convention with her mother. This meeting of many women launched the suffrage movement. Well, my two-part series, I Am Woman, is based on actual events in history, although it is creative fiction. There are two parts to this Victorian romance: women's rights and states' rights. One of the first things I do when I start writing my novels is to jot down a rough outline. In the outline, I also add the names of my characters. I've had several readers, or actually of my blogs and listeners to my podcast, have asked me questions like, how do you make the novel? How do you come up with the idea of the novel? I also have some that ask me, where do you get the names for these characters? Well, to be honest with you, they come from many friends I've made over the years. In the case of these two novels, Part 1 and Part 2, I started out by looking for names of the characters or running thoughts through my mind or whatever it might be, and I happened to pull out my top desk drawer to get a pen out because the other one had run out of ink. And when I did, there was a Polaroid picture laying right there in the top drawer, and it was a photograph of 4 girlfriends from Columbus, Texas: Dianne, Bonzo, Debbie, and Frances. And they were stuffed in the back of my trunk in my Ford Maverick. You see, we had just finished floating the 4-hour trip of the Colorado River that ran through a small town west of Houston. So, without further ado, let's get underway. My story begins about 10 years after the convention in Seneca Falls in the summer of 1860. And it begins with 4 young women known throughout the reading as the 4 Musketeers, who are all single, and they all graduate from the Hampton Women's College in Virginia. It follows their courtship with handsome men from all walks of life: Colonel Richard Dick Jackson, Reverend Russell James Keiner, Brett Meyer, and an Italian opera star, Carlos Orsi. The lead character in my novel is Dianne Jenkins, who is portrayed as a man-hater. But is she really? The rights usually enjoyed by women were always given up when they crossed the threshold and said, "I do." As a matter of fact, a woman gives up so many civil and property rights back then upon walking across that threshold that she was said to be entering a state of civil death. One such woman who would not stand for this inequality was our Dianne Jenkins, the 10-year-old who attended the Seneca Falls Convention with her mother. She loves so dearly Reverend Russell Keiner with all of her heart, but she hates him with all of her mind. Now, I know you're listening and you're saying, how can that be? Is that even possible? To love someone with all their heart but hate them with all their mind? Well, you have to listen to her speech. She gave it as a magna cum laude at Hampton's College and describes her feeling towards inequality while not pulling any punches. You see, back in those days, married women were not allowed to make contracts, devise their last will and testament, or even participate in other legal transactions. Simply put, women, once married, were not in control of any of the wages they ever earned. In my story, Dianne Jenkins is an outspoken woman. When I use the word outspoken, it's a substantial understatement. She disliked the fact that women were expected, once they got married, to do the maintenance of the family, from sewing a pair of socks, to doing the laundry, to cooking meals, and, of course, bearing as many cotton-picking children as she could until it killed her. Now, because the laws were written by men, a married woman was supposed to remain home and take care of that cooking and the cleaning and getting pregnant every time she hung her husband's pants on the clothesline. Now, as the first of this 2-volume novel unfolds, we will find our 4 women standing beside their fathers while our country splits during the beginning of the Civil War. And all 4 of them will fight for the glory of the Star-Spangled Banner and states' rights. Or, do they take up arms with the Confederacy? At the same time this is happening, one of our women fights not to be in control by a man she so dearly loves. The problem is that she loves him and desires him with her heart, but there's something from her past that keeps her mind from letting him into her heart. You know, as I was doing my research, there were several quotes made that I have in my book, and I'd like to bring out some of the quotes from different women back during that time. One is from Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and she said, "The best protection any woman can have is courage." Just like Helen Reddy said, "I am woman, I am strong." Well, another one, and one of my favorites, was Susan B. Anthony. I distrust those people who know so well what God wants them to do, because I notice it's always coincide with their own desires. Oh, and there's another one by Chuck Palahniuk. Women are already born so far ahead ability-wise, the day men can give birth, that's when we can start talking about equal rights. And another by Susan B. Anthony. There shall never be another season of silence until women have the same rights as men have on this green earth. You know, back to my story. Women did fill a variety of roles in the Civil War. In addition to the women who served as spies, cooks, seamstresses, even nurses. There's a place in my book that we talk about. One of the girls are a nurse. And 500 posed as male soldiers. So, who were these hundreds of women soldiers? Why did they join? And how did they manage to pull off their impersonations without being discovered? The answer lies in the sequel to I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. In the book, Part 2, I Am Woman, I Am Invincible. Now, the women soldiers of the Civil War, they were mothers, wives, daughters, even sisters, and were found in the Confederacy and the Union armies. Some joined to be near a family member, father, brother, or to be next to the man they loved. Others answered the recruitment calls found in the local newspapers. The war was an opportunity to demonstrate their firmly held patriotism and beliefs. Some found freedom from strict gender roles. Unlike today, no proof of identity or social security number was required back then. This allowed almost anyone, except those most obviously women and children, to join the ranks. You know, I believe the best way, like in my book when I was doing my research, the best way I think I found for a woman to remain undetected as a woman soldier was to behave as any soldier would when on the battlefield. Women who fought in the Civil War as male soldiers flouted the societal ideal of a mid-19th century woman by using her skills such as physical strength, her intelligence, and bravery. Some lasted years of the war before being found out. I know as I'm telling the story of the making of I Am Woman, you're listening to me and you're saying, come on now. You're probably sitting there listening and saying, how in the heck could a woman hide specific men-loved attributes? Well, the typical uniform was sufficiently ill-fitting and layered to hide many physical traits, and soldiers rarely changed uniforms. According to one account when writing in my research journal for the story, was being infatuated with a young man who had gone into the service made up her mind to follow him. She cut off her hair, put on a man's clothing, and for 2 years she marched next to this young man, shouldering her musket and performing every duty required of men without being found out. So, on the other hand, my story is a Victorian romance, right? So, you might be there sitting and asking, how can it be a romance if one woman hates all men and the other women wish to offer their services to both sides of the Civil War? In the heat of the battle, love will find a way to survive, even if it takes over 700 plus pages to do so. Whenever you do get around to either listening to the audio of these two books, or you grab a paperback or you grab an ebook, you might be reading the book and listening to the book or whatever you might be doing, and you might end up being like me. Until I was doing the research to write these two novels, I really didn't know what a poor life that women had after they said I do. I didn't know that her whole life was taken away. I didn't know that the husband could take her land, her money when they got married, and within a week he could be on his horse riding down the river and going away, and there's nothing illegal about it. He could take everything. Well, and that got me to thinking a little bit, and I know it doesn't really have that much to do with my story, but I was watching the news the other night, I don't know, several months ago actually, and I saw him taking the statues down off the campus of the University of Texas of Robert E. Lee and others. I saw him removing Jefferson Davis during the same time period over in New Orleans. You know, that's history. So I guess what I'm saying is I had no idea how difficult it was for a woman in the mid-1800s and how hard they had to fight for that right to vote, for that privilege to be equal to men. And that's why the writing of these two novels really mean a lot to me, because I really, really learned how to appreciate what they fought for. So now, that brings me to the reading of a short snippet from the novel, one that I always do. Both the ebook and paperback are available, and the audio version for both books, Part 1 and Part 2, is due out on Apple and Google Plays and other vendors in June of 2021. Before I get off with my snippet from the novel, something I have to always do because the podcasts just don't run themselves, I have a few words from my sponsor, Anchor FM, a great choice for your podcasting experience. Have you heard about Anchor.fm by Spotify? It's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Yep, Anchor has the tools that will allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Why do you have such a puzzling expression on your face, Dianne? It's as white as snow. God, what's wrong? Please talk to me. What has happened? What are we being saved from? Sienna cried, wringing both of her hands in distress. Oh, heaven, Sienna, do you not know what's happening? Look around you. The ship is wrecked on the rocks. The crew's leaving her in lifeboats, Dianne exclaimed solemnly. No! Oh, please say it's not true, Dianne. Oh, mercy, mercy to God. Sienna's words were screamed loudly. She was wild with horror and despair. Come now, Sienna. Get a hold of yourself and be firm. You must hold up or you will surely perish. Be a woman, for God's sake. Let these men helping us see that we can brave death with the best of them, Dianne said in a rush of words. Not now, Dianne. Not now. I don't care what they see. Oh dear, for God's sake, don't let me die, cried the poor woman. Johanna had returned to her stateroom and came walking out the top hatch to the deck. What's all the fuss about? She asked while carrying her bonnet and a shawl for her landing ashore. Molly's father rushed by Johanna and went down the stairs to save his daughter. Russell Keiner rushed up to the side of Dianne. His face was pale, and his expression showed he had a long night. Dianne, we must hurry. The ship is a total wreck, and the crew is about to abandon her. But they are giving us a short amount of time to save ourselves and get to the boats. Let me take you at once. The entire scene was now turning into one of unparalleled horror and desolation. The sun was just climbing up above the horizon through the dark and ragged clouds. The lightning and thunder ceased. The wind died to a calm. However, the sea had yet to calm and still foamed with rage and rose in mighty waves above the Dead Heart. The ship was a total wreck, laid split in two upon the sharp rocks, and her bows were totally underwater. The lifeboats were all afloat beside the ship, and the crew began crowding into them. Captain Bill stood watching, pale and stern, by the starboard gangway, seeing that the women were lowered into the boats. Sienna and Joanna were lowered down into one, and Molly lowered into the other. Sick at heart at the sight surrounding her, Dianne stopped. Looking down upon the rough waters below, where there were two full lifeboats. Russell stood by her side, silent, livid, and breathing hard like a hound spent on a long chase of a fox. He suddenly reached over and seized Dianne's hand and nearly crushed it in a firm grip. He whispered hoarsely in a voice of strong passion, more robust than death and the grave, "Dianne, we are on the immediate brink of eternity. I love you. I love you more than life itself, more than all things created on heaven or earth. My love, tell me in this last mortal hour before we part, tell me, Dianne, that you love me too." His breath wedged in his throat, as he could feel his heart pounding in his chest. She remained silent and looked him deeply in the eyes. She raised her hand above her head and pointed to the heavens above. "We shall meet there, Russell Keiner. I will tell you then." For whatever reason, her answer seemed to satisfy the young preacher. There was a brief ray of joy that inspired and lauded his expression. "Come, my dear, we must hurry and get you down into the lifeboat. Your friends are already there, and I will help and I'll let you down. What about you, Russell? Come with us." She fought to control her swirling emotions. "They're leaving me with the ship. Now, come, let me help you down. You must hurry." "Why are they leaving you with the sinking ship?" "There's no more room in the lifeboats. Please, Dianne, you must hurry. There's not another instant to be lost." "No, Russell. I won't enter the lifeboat. I will remain with you on the shipwreck. I'm not afraid of death," she exclaimed. "But you must get in the lifeboat, Dianne. There's no more time to argue about this. This ship is surely doomed. Please." "The boats are beginning to leave. Come. Let me help you down," he eagerly exclaimed. "Then enough is enough. I will save you," he cried, hastily laying both hands on her and began to lift her over the side. "Stop it, Russell. Stop it. Don't you dare use force with me," she exclaimed while the pastor released his hands. "What's wrong with you, Dianne? The ship is sinking," he cried, breathing hard with high anxiety. "Then so be it. I will sink with the ship," she persisted. "I will sink with you." "I don't understand." "Why?" Keiner demanded, scarcely able to keep his hands off the woman he loved. "Why?" Perhaps her wishing to share his fate was her motive for wishing to stay on board the Dead Heart with him. "Because I would rather sink with the ship and meet a quick death than take my chances floating on a vast sea of nothingness. No, Russell, I will remain right here and await my fate." "Then, Lord above, forgive me, but I will not permit you to do so, my love. You're mine by the right of the strongest love a man could possibly have for a woman," he exclaimed while throwing his arms around her and lifting her up as though she was only a child. He lowered her over the side where the last lifeboat was just about to push off. "Stop it, Russell! For God's sake, stop it!" She swallowed hard, lifted her chin, and boldly met his gaze. The pastor didn't reply and shouted, "Stop! Some of you help, lower her down. Catch her as I let go. Jaden, here, catch her when I let go. Hold your arms up." Molly rushed over and held her arms up too. "Let her go. We'll catch her." As he was letting her go, Dianne clung to his breast. However, Russell reached over with one hand and tore her away from the hold she had on him. She dropped into the strong arms of Janan O'Finnegan, assisted by Molly. Russell stepped back on the deck and looked down at the boat as it pushed off. An awful scream of anguish came up from the boat as Dianne stood up and stretched forth her arms yearningly, longingly towards him, shouting, "Russell, I love you. Take me with you. Please. Oh, Russell, my beloved." Russell waved to Jaden to take charge of Dianne and turned away, white as death itself. Molly gently laid an insensible form in the lap of his wife Isabella, the other woman on the boat. Sienna and Joanna were in the other lifeboat. Well, that does it for me on episode 13, The Making of an Author and the Making of I Am Woman. And as I used to say back when Smokey and the Bandit was going down Interstate 10 in the movie, as I leave today, my final saying is, I'll catch you on the flip-flop. Well, see you soon. Happy listening. Well, that does it for me for another great episode from Sidney St. James. Be sure to click on the tab above that says send a voice message, and I will get it from you, and I'll probably play it back on one of my future podcasts. Also, don't forget to click the button follow. I'd love for you to follow my podcast. But it's been fun. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And until next time, here I am, Sidney St. James. Happy listening.